Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Tuesday Talks with FEO. I'm Debbie Mann and your host for today, and I'm excited to welcome Dwayne McMulkin. Before we get to meet Dwayne, I just wanted to give a little bit of housekeeping for those who have joined us for the first time. This is being recorded, and it will be posted by tomorrow morning. If you have any questions, feel free to either unmute and ask them or put them into the chat room, and I will ask Dwayne the questions and he will answer them. And I just want to say thanks to Jay for being in the background and supporting us, and thank you all for joining us here this morning. So welcome, Dwayne. Thank you for doing this with me.
Of course. Yeah, no, I'm excited. This is great.
Yeah, I'm just so excited to hear what you have to say about what's happening in Canada's Wonderland. So instead of me reading your bio, why don't you just give us a quick overview of what you do there? And just that would help.
Sure. So thank you for the invite. Anytime I get the chance to talk about Canada's Wonderland, I mean, I work at an amusement park, so you can't have fun doing that and telling some of the stories about it, then I don't know what career you could possibly find. But I've been with Canada's Wonderland now for 4 years as the marketing director there. And it seems like every year has been a very different story while I've been there, and I've been looking out to next year, and it's going to be a very different story again. It's a fantastic place just because everything does change so much on an annual basis in terms of new things we're bringing to the park, new audiences, new growth. So as the marketing director, I get to work on really anything that drives people into the park. So that's my ultimate goal, is to drive as much attendance as possible, get as many people excited as possible about coming to Canada's Wonderland, whether it be during our opening day in the spring, our summer operating months with the water park and the ride park, and then as we get into fall with our Halloween activities, and now with Winterfest. So I've got a great team. We've got a bunch of great partners that we work with, and I truly describe it as a place that's a privilege to work. So.
That's lovely. That is so great. So you mentioned, so this whole last 2 years, yep. You were, I noticed, when we chatted, you said you had record numbers in 2019 and then the pandemic hit. So how did you as an organization, or you as an amusement park, deal with that? And what did you do in the gap? Because you were closed down for a long time.
We were. So if you go back to 2019 was one of those career years that you hope you get the opportunity to be a part of with the organization that you're with. We launched a brand new world record-breaking roller coaster, Yukon Striker. That's what's in my background today, actually. It's the world's tallest, longest, fastest dive coaster. And if you ever get to be one of the very first people to ride a brand new world record-breaking roller coaster, you'll count yourself lucky in your career. So we got a lot of mileage out of that. It was a great launch, a lot of international attention that it brought to the park, and people loved it. The feedback was great. And that really carried us through the spring and summer months. All of our events and value-added activities that we had at the park were all elevated, largely because of that, just how impressive that ride was and everything else that it brought for us. And then as we started to wind down in the fall, we also introduced a brand new event in the shoulder season called Winterfest, which runs from the end of November right through until New Year's Eve. And 2019 was the first year for that, and I'd say it far exceeded our expectations. And probably the best way to describe it is I got to know the park really well. You step into Canada's Wonderland and you walk in, you see the fountain, you see the mountain right there. You can see the rides off to both sides. And the first time I stepped into Winterfest, it was just like a world that I had never been in before. The entire park is transformed for Christmas and the holiday season. And it's not about the rides, it's not about roller coasters, it's about ice skating on the entire fountain gets turned into a massive ice skating rink. Millions of lights, hundreds of Christmas trees around, more than a dozen live shows. It's just an amazing experience that we thought people would spend about an hour in the park, to be honest, with Winterfest, as they did the walkthrough. And most of the visits were lasting 3, 4, 5+ hours. It was just incredible. So I think I was there, we operated 18 days in 2019, and I was there for 15 of them. And I don't think I ever got tired of watching the tree lighting ceremony to kick it off. So that was kind of 2019. We ran into New Year's Eve. We closed the park, and we're feeling great about ourselves. We've got a really good start on things like season pass sales for 2020, and we're really building on our success. And then all of a sudden, March hits, and everyone gets sent home, and we don't think too much about it at that point because we don't open until late April, early May anyhow, and it was just going to be 2 weeks until we all got to go back. And then 2 weeks just kept getting extended, and we kept running new scenarios for what we would do from an attendance perspective and how we would get people back into the park and which health and safety protocols we would need to follow. And then it just all of a sudden felt like we were doing that for like a year and a half of the park being closed. And so lots of different things that we had to do along the way to try and keep really three things on the go. Number one, Wonderland. It was a constant partnership with the province, with organizations like TIO and Central Counties and Attractions Ontario to really try and figure out how we could get the amusement park sector reopen in Ontario. That was one piece. Number two was just our teams, personally and professionally, trying to keep everybody engaged and making sure everyone was okay. And then number three, taking care of yourself along the way too, to make sure that you're still engaged and doing okay in your personal life, and using the time as an opportunity to grow your professional career a little bit too, because it gave you time to do things that you didn't have time to do before. So that was really those months, and then we finally got approval to reopen this year, and it's felt like things have been in a constant state of flux, which is what everyone's been experiencing. We all wish we had more certainty and more direction and more guidance. You can imagine that opening an amusement park it's a bit of a complex operation, from the rides to the number of part-time staff that we need to help support the park. So getting a message on a Friday afternoon that we could possibly reopen on a Monday doesn't really work for an operation like us. We need several weeks of lead time. So and every time we have to make a change to the health and safety protocols, that sort of filters down to that operational model as well. So it's been a crazy, whatever it is, we're at month 19 or 20 or wherever we are at this stage, but here we are. You're on mute there, Debbie.
Sorry, we're getting lots of comments that there's buzzing going on. So I'm logging into my other computer, and I'm going to log out of this one. So I'll be right back. Is that better, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Darn, I was put in headphones and thought it was going to be better, and it was worse. So my apologies. So I hope you heard that, because it really was great. So you had some challenges, and now I don't know where I am. Sorry, everyone. So talk to us about what you did to address what was going on. Like, what did you do for the year that you were done, like that you were closed? How did you keep your participants engaged in Canada's Wonderland?
Yeah, so if you go back to 2020, the world kind of shuts down in March. We're scheduled to open early May. So for those first couple of months, it's just kind of everyone's sitting at home, kind of preparing to reopen the park. And then you get to a stage where you realize you're not going to reopen the park on the normal day that you had planned to originally. And then you go into just scenario planning mode of, all right, if we open on this date, what does that look like? If we open on this date, what does that look like? And there's really a few things that happen. If you think about it from a guest perspective, you're trying to provide them, they're all looking for answers. We have a bunch of season pass holders, for instance, who already paid for their season passes for the season because they bought them in the fall of the previous year. They want to know when we're opening and what the park experience is going to look like, because they've already bought tickets essentially for that year. And then we're trying to get them as many answers as we can provide, but we don't have a lot of answers either, because no one did throughout that process. And like I said earlier, everyone wanted a bit more certainty, and we were in constant communication with the Ministry of Tourism to try and get answers and to try and get some guidance, and working with some of our other partners. But that was really kind of how I felt about 2020. It was a stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. We might open, we could open. If we do open, how much of the park opens? Okay, we've lost the water park for the year. What can we do in the fall? At one point, we got to talking about the winter season, and we thought that might be an opportunity to offer something because it wouldn't be a traditional amusement park experience. It would be more of a walk through, lights, snow, music. Just how can we get some people into the park to enjoy it? And that one didn't get approved either. So we made the decision back in 2020 that, well, all these pass holders who paid for the 2020 season, we needed to extend their passes out to 2021, which was the only fair thing that we could do at that stage. And we did the same thing for anyone who had tickets purchased for the 2020 year. And then winter came and went, and we all thought that, okay, well, this thing can't last another whole year, right? We'll get the park open in the spring. So we really, I would say we refocused that winter on how do we come up with some new, unique, innovative ways to stay engaged and top of mind for especially our season pass holders. And we ended up getting to do some really cool stuff. So we introduced online trivia nights that ran for 8 weeks as an example through January, February, and early March. And it was one of those things that you think, okay, well, we'll do this and we'll see. It was live, and I hosted it with our PR director. And the first couple, it's like, we'll see how this goes. We had committed to the 8. 2021 was also Wonderland's 40th anniversary. So it was a great opportunity to talk about some of the history and nostalgia that goes along with the park, because everyone has a memory of Wonderland at some point if you grew up here. So we ran those, and to our I was pleasantly surprised that we ended up having hundreds of people attend, like live participating in those calls for 8 weeks. And so here we are sitting January, February on Thursday nights from a closed amusement park, and we've got hundreds of people doing these online live trivia sessions with us. So that was absolutely fantastic. It really gave us an opportunity too, because we weren't as focused on selling tickets and passes as we normally would during that period of time, because we didn't have an opening date. So we could really celebrate the history of the park, and you go back through the years of all the different characters that have been there, the different food that's been there, the rides and when they were introduced, and tell some of those stories. So it really turned into a fantastic engagement program that carried us through the first part of 2021 with the goal that we get open for opening day. And then opening day kind of slid a little bit as there was more uncertainty that crept up. But finally, we got approval in early July to reopen the park, which we did for this year. Definitely was a different experience with all of the health and safety protocols that we had in place. We had to introduce capacity limits, which meant building out reservation systems. The in-park experience was different because guests were wearing masks on rides. You don't really like your ride photo as much when you're wearing a mask. It's kind of like Santa photos right now that we're all going through with our kids. It's a bit different. So it definitely wasn't, this year hasn't felt like the traditional Canada's Wonderland operating year where there's just big crowds and buzz and excitement, and you look everywhere you look, just people having a good time and a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to getting back to that next year.
Did you, when you did open, did you add any elements to help keep like the distancing? Like, what did you do to engage your people, your customers to, I think at Disneyland, I don't know, did you put signs, arrows?
Good question. That was one of the pieces that we worked on and really spent a lot of time on in the off season. And there's two parts to it. There's the part you want to do for your guests, and then there's the part that you have to do for the permission to reopen, the health and safety protocols that legally you have to implement. So let's deal with the guests piece first. And when you think about mom wanting to bring her young kids to the park, you really want to make sure that she feels comfortable and safe and has a great experience while she's there. So we used that as a guiding principle when designing what the park experience would really look like. And so that's where things like our reservation system with timed entry. So you would book a reservation for a particular date and time to come into the park. And what that allowed us to do is our guests knew that they weren't going to show up and there would be a significant number of people, large crowds, big lineups at front gate that they'd have to be standing in. So that was first and foremost, was making sure that we could space people out appropriately. And then while they were in the park, we had definitely a lot of signage in regards to reminding everyone to wear masks while they were in the park at all times when they couldn't maintain distancing or on queue lines and on rides. We had ground markers that we had to install in all of our queue areas, washroom monitors that made sure we only had the right number of people in the washroom at once and that cleaning protocols were being followed. We had to make sure that all of our staff felt safe and taken care of. You can imagine that the majority of Wonderland's workforce is made up of teenage students. My son's actually working there at Winterfest right now. And so part of that is making sure that they feel comfortable and safe, and that their parents feel comfortable and safe with them working in the environment that they were working in. So health and safety training was a big piece, making sure they have the personal protective equipment that they needed, including masks, goggles where necessary, gloves, whatever it was. Cleaning protocols were a big thing. How often should you clean a ride? The health and safety side says clean all the high touch surfaces as much as possible. The guest experience side says we want to make sure we get as many guests onto the rides as we can, and we don't want them waiting in line for an hour. So if you're going to clean every cycle, that's really slowing things down. So that was first and foremost, was really trying to figure out the guest experience piece. When it came to the province and working with the Ministry of Tourism, who was our voice with the Ministry of Health for figuring out how we would reopen, it was a very interesting experience. We're an amusement park, so it's not like retail or restaurants, where big industries with thousands of members in Ontario. When you think about amusement parks, really aren't that many of us. So it's kind of, you have Canada's Wonderland, and then you have other locations like Marineland, Santa's Village. So you do have other partners there, but we're not a big industry. So one of the things that the government had asked us to do was, as opposed to just Wonderland submitting reopening proposals, and then each of us doing it individually, we really came together with the other amusement parks and water parks across the province to try and come up with one set of reopening protocols that was really considered best practice internationally. So we have a great international body, with IAPA, who they were fantastic in terms of helping the industry craft what the reopening protocols could look like, so they could then take those to their local health officials to propose them as a safe way to get the parks opened back up. So that was the secondary piece, was making sure that we worked with the province on getting the park reopened in a safe way.
And is working with the province was really not part of your job description originally, was it?
No, if you kind of what I mentioned earlier, that the time the park was closed gave us all an opportunity to learn about things and do things that we never had the opportunity to do before, whether we wanted to or not. I mean, my career has been built around kind of selling stuff. I was in retail with Staples and Toys R Us before Canada's Wonderland, as a marketing director in both of those organizations. And then moving to Canada's Wonderland, where you're built around entirely selling as many tickets as possible and driving as many people into the park every day as possible. And it really, I spent the majority of my time while the park was closed in more of a government relations and industry relations role. As I mentioned, the amusement parks and water parks in Ontario we don't have a formal association. We don't have a formal relationship or working group between us. And Wonderland being the biggest, we kind of took the lead on pulling everybody together and making sure that we had one voice working with the province. As far as working with the Ministry of Tourism, I would say that's one area that Wonderland's always been so big and so successful. We haven't had a need for a very close partnership with the ministry in years past. They've definitely been helpful along the way, especially if I think about things like opening and launching Winterfest. They were very supportive of that in terms of crafting, identifying shoulder seasons where there were opportunities, and there were funding support opportunities with that. But I wouldn't say we ever had no really close relationship with them. And so it definitely changed what I was doing when I got up each morning and coming into my home office, compared to figuring out how we were going to bump attendance up this weekend compared to where we were last weekend. So learned a lot through that, and definitely the relationships and the networking that came out of it on the industry side and on the government side are things that will certainly help us going forward.
That's great. So all the things that you implemented, the reservation system, well, I don't know if you had you didn't have the reservation system before.
We did not.
Could people just kind of walk in? Like, that was pretty much the model, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Going to Wonderland this weekend.
That was the idea of a season pass, is that you get unlimited visits to Canada's Wonderland, and you could come we have some pass holders that come twice, and we have some pass holders that come, I think in 2019 my kids were there 12 times. So wow. It's that was the model. And now we actually, for most of this year, we're on that reservation system, which did a few things for us. Number one, it allowed us to manage that capacity number. So the province did mandate a capacity calculation for us that we had to live within. things have loosened up now with the requiring the proof of vaccination for large scale outdoor events. If we wanted to remove the capacity limits, then we had to go down that road. So we have the reservation system in place. It provides us some flexibility at times and certainty at times if we feel we need to go back to it. As the person who is responsible for trying to figure out reservations and how many people would come to the park, we have a great team at Wonderland. We're actually owned by a company called Cedar Fair. So we have a phenomenal set of resources that we're doing this across multiple parks, so we didn't have to go at it alone. I definitely felt for some of the smaller, whether it be amusement parks, water parks, or other members of our industry that are independent and need to try and figure all this stuff out. I don't know how they're doing it on top of keeping their business going. But we had a great set of support resources in place to help us out with it.
And will you mentioned that you probably won't be keeping it, but what has it given you? I mean, what information has it given you having this reservation? How has it been able to have you manage your park with the reservation system?
Yeah, it's good and bad. If you deal with the bad first, the big negative to it is just another barrier to a guest being able to visit the park. So as we had reservations in place for the summer, there were times when we were at capacity, and with fall in particular in our Halloween haunt program, we would just run out of reservations on a given night, and so guests couldn't come. And so it was just another piece that made it harder to visit the park, which wasn't great, but it did give us throughout this, obviously, little cost certainty, especially in how we operate. You can imagine it's expensive to run an amusement park on a nightly basis or on a daily basis. So it did give us a better forecasting tool to understand how many people were going to be in the park on say the coming Saturday, because we knew how many reservations had been booked and we knew what our average no-show rate was. So that helps us with our staffing model, for instance. How many turnstiles do we need open at front gate? How many toll booths do we need open? How many food locations do we need open throughout the park? So obviously you can imagine a big day versus a small day. Those numbers are very different and can swing. So it gave us more flexibility in our operating cost model, and allowed, because we knew how many people were coming to the park, assuming average weather on a given day. But it definitely hurt our guests in terms of not being able to just show up whenever they wanted to show up.
Right. And you mentioned staffing. How has staffing been for you? I mean, worldwide, we're hearing the challenges of staffing overall.
Yeah, staffing is a challenge. I think there are a few pieces to that. Number one, we would normally open in the spring, so late April, early May. So you do have some university and college students that as soon as their educational year winds down, they're able to kickstart their year at Wonderland. Because we weren't open, a lot of those students ended up finding other jobs or doing something else, taking another school term, whatever it might have been at that period of time. So we missed out on that group. So when we reopened in July, you're kind of already into summer. And so people have either found another job or decided that they're just not going to work this summer because there's only a few weeks left. And so that hurt us, because when you get into the fall and when you get into the winter, lots of times you're just pulling, in an ideal world, you're using the same labor group that you've used, and it's a smaller operation, so you can kind of pick the best of the best who worked with you all summer and keep them on board. So it's been a challenge for us, and as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we need thousands of seasonal staff to support the operation. Think about just how big it is in terms of the number of food and beverage locations and our guest services team that get people into the park. Our ride operations team, our retail staff, all of the behind the scene landscaping work. There's a lot that goes into running a 300-acre amusement park. So it feels like we were constantly trying to turn over every rock to find more staff this year.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, even now, like a lot of colleges and universities are going virtual. So, has that, how that's probably impacted you as well, as far as bringing on students. So
yes, yeah, I think we're in a good place with Winterfest. I would say now it feels like it's been a bit easier. It is a smaller operation. We're not running all of the rides. We don't use the entire footprint of the park. So big guest services complement up front to get people into the park, but it is a bit easier than our normal operating seasons. So we're in a really good place. As I was walking through Saturday and Sunday night, everyone seems very happy and engaged and thrilled to be there. So yeah, I think we're in a good place now, and we hope that by the time we open up in 2022, we're kind of back to where we were in 2019, with Wonderland just being a fantastic place for people to work, and they want to be there and they want to have fun in the environment and go back to where we were.
Is there anything, you've mentioned a few things that you've been able to adapt and add to keep your customers engaged. Is there anything that you would keep? Or are you looking for more ideas moving forward? Like, what has it taught you about the off season? What has it taught you about the future of amusement parks in general?
Yeah, so I mean, our off season in 2019, when we introduced Winterfest, it definitely, if you go back all the way that far, it definitely reduced our off season. I mean, it's an interesting world when you run like crazy for half the year. So previously we were closing on Halloween, basically, when our haunt and Camp Spooky operations wrapped up, and then we'd be off until the end of April. Now, it doesn't mean that that's one of the questions that I always get asked is, oh, do you work at Wonderland? Do you work all year round, or do you, you're only part-time? I was like, I'm not the guy who pushes the button to make Leviathan go. Our off season's actually busier, because that's the only time we have to do all of our strategy and planning work and partnership meetings and really to lay out the year. That's what takes place during our off season. So when we launched Winterfest back in 2019, we went from being closed November through third or fourth week in April to now only being closed January through that third week in April. So it really condensed things for us. And when I'm looking ahead at this year, same idea. We're going to go into January. We're going to come off a fantastic Winterfest run here, because we're already looking at the engagement levels and how excited everyone is to be back at the park. It's not a lot of time when you go back to all of that strategy and planning work. And then from an engagement perspective, I think we can do things like a lot of the social stuff we did. I don't know if you remember, we released our funnel cake recipe as an example. And then we got a bunch of really great videos and photos of families trying to make funnel cake at home. And then we realized we needed to blow out the instructions and make them a little more intuitive. And so things like that really help you connect with the park while we are closed. The online trivia nights were another one that we mentioned. We got great response from teachers. If you kind of think about kids doing school trips to Canada's Wonderland, seems like a rite of passage for grade 8 students. And we have a lot of really great programs with our Festival of Music and our marketing and sales leadership programs, our Spark leadership programs that we operate out of the park. We do math, science, and engineering days where kids get to learn about how the rides actually work. So we have all of these. We were able to bring them to life in a virtual way because the park was closed. And so those are all things that now I think we're going to take a look at in our off season. How do we continue partnering with teachers in an educational way to provide content that they can use in their classrooms during that January, February, March timeframe when the park is closed? And same thing for families. So if it's sharing recipes through a Pinterest board as an example that people can use for family day, if it's, I don't know, virtual roller coaster rides. We had some great videos of parents with their kids in laundry baskets, and they were in front of a big screen TV, and it was like they were front row on Leviathan or Yukon Striker. It's just fun, simple things that we can do that ultimately, that's all great fun content, right? We're in the entertainment business. We're a fun brand. Where families should have a smile on their face every time they think about Canada's Wonderland. So these are all things that we can keep going in the off season now, just to sort of bridge that January, February, March timeframe until they're actually able to get back and experience it in person again.
And how do you collaborate? Like, I know that you do North America. You do amusement parks North America wide, right? That's your new job, job, or your new footprint for you and where you're going. How have you shared information across North America?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Canada's Wonderland is owned by our parent organization, Cedar Fair. Cedar Fair owns 11 amusement parks across regional amusement parks. Think of Canada's Wonderland just times 11 across North America. They all look and feel very different and have very unique audiences and unique experiences. But at the end of the day, we have 11 regional amusement parks. We have a couple of water parks that we operate down in Texas, and we have a whole bunch of other stuff, whether it be hotels, resorts, golf courses, you name it. We're trying to just keep building that out. So I am lucky enough to have taken my Wonderland experience, and I do get the opportunity to work with 4 of our other parks now, and help lead their marketing approach. What you realize is it's a very similar go-to-market strategy and model in terms of how we sell tickets and season passes and use limited time events during the summer to help create excitement and get pass holders out, give them another reason to come to the park and experience something unique and different each year. So this has been one of the pieces that, as a result of, it's not entirely as a result of being shut down. I mean, looking at a way to share best practices across the parks and take those best practices and implement them. Canada's Wonderland, I don't want to downplay just how fantastic it is and how well it has performed in the overall Cedar Fair landscape. So we are able to extend a lot of the stuff that we did here that works really well in our market, seeing which of those apply to other local markets, and at the same time bringing some really great things that happen at some of our other parks up to Wonderland. And it's going to make all of the parks better at the end of the day. And we'll see some really cool, neat stuff that isn't necessarily always tied to putting in a big, fast roller coaster, but just really makes kind of the day-to-day experience at the park really great. And Winterfest is a good example of something that, when you think of Wonderland, you think of, like I said, big, fast roller coasters. But the Winterfest experience, if you haven't been to it or seen it, it's like nothing you've ever been to. If you can get there before Christmas, it's huge. It just puts a different feeling in your mind. You walk. The way I describe it to people is you just walk Wonderland when you're there in the summer. I watch my kids go through the front gate and they run. They have their path and their route figured out. They know they decide whether they're going right to Leviathan or left to Yukon Striker first, and that changes by visit, but they run. No one runs at Winterfest. Everything is very slow. You watch, whether it's little kids, teenage kids, mom and dad, or grandparents, everyone just moves through the park really slow because you just want to take it all in. So that's an example of something that's completely different and unique from what we've done in the past that we're able to bring to Canada's Wonderland. So there'll be a lot more of that sharing of what really works well across the parks that we should build out in more locations.
Excuse me. My apologies on that. So is the design of Winter Wonderland an internal design? Is it a collaboration? Do you hire people?
Yep. No, it's a good question. We have, as I mentioned earlier, with Cedar Fair, we have a great set of resources that support all of the parks and people who are industry leaders in designing events like a Winterfest, as an example, or a Halloween haunt. And so a large part of what they do is build out from the marketing perspective, my job is to identify where there are opportunities for incremental attendance or to improve the guest experience. And so that would be identifying a time period, say in the summer months at a particular park where we don't currently offer an event or a festival or a unique experience, and taking a look at if we did offer something and we offered it and catered to a particular target audience and market, what could that get us from an incremental attendance perspective? Winterfest is a good example of that if you go back a few years, Canada's Wonderland was actually the 6th park in our chain to get Winterfest. It had been done at other parks before. So this is an event that came out of that really great central resource team that designed just this phenomenal Christmas winter experience for our parks. And then over time, you introduce it at 1 or 2 to test it out, and then you see what works and what doesn't, and you refine it, and then you expand it to more parks, and then that model just keeps proliferating anywhere you think you can drive the attendance. Not all parks and markets and climates are as conducive to Winterfest. Sometimes more snow is good, sometimes less snow is good. It's interesting visiting California or North Carolina to see Winterfest in a warm climate. Definitely a different feel when you've got roller coasters running and screams than what you get at our Winterfest, but it's definitely very different. So yeah, we lean on very much this industry leading group of experts that's what their background is designing experiences such as this.
So just something's coming up for me. Do you collaborate outside of Cedar Falls? Is it Cedar
Fair?
Cedar Fairs. Do you collaborate or do you go out within the Ontario group or Canada to see what else you can do? I'm just, because I'm in the festival world, of course. Yep. Do you reach out or do you look at what other people are doing to bring ideas?
Well, we're always willing to steal great ideas from competitors. There's no shame in that. And to be perfectly honest, when you're in an industry with companies like Disney and Universal Studios, keeping an eye on what they're doing on a regular basis isn't a bad business strategy to follow. From a partnership perspective, yes. And I would say that I see Sandra's on here from Central Counties. This is one thing that we've worked really closely with them on. There are always gaps. Every organization has gaps or opportunities that can be filled with partnerships. And there's lots of different examples that I can talk about, but I mean, a couple that come to mind. Number one, Vaughan International Film Festival was a group that had approached us through Sandra and asked if there was something we could be doing with them. And we tested a couple of different things. We allowed them to screen some of their, we partnered with them on screening some of their movies when we didn't have anything else playing in our Canterbury theater early on in the season. And that did well for us. It gave us another thing to talk about, another experience for our guests when they came to the park, so that they weren't just spending all day feeling like they were standing in lines. Now they could go and try something different. And they actually came back for our Halloween Haunt event in 2019. And again, in Canterbury Theatre, ran a series of Halloween-centric short films, which were awesome. And it gave people, especially mom and dad, a chance to get out of the cold and into a warm theater to watch something a little bit unique and different. So that's one example. Another one that is probably one of my favorite experiences that I've ever had is when we did open up Winterfest in 2019. I mean, the most perfect marketing fit was the Toronto Santa Claus Parade, and getting a float into the parade and partnering with them. They're a nonprofit charity. And so we entered the parade in 2019. Fast forward to 2020 and everything is closed. We're closed. They can't do a parade in downtown Toronto. We can't even have Christmas dinner with our family. So they can't have millions of people on the streets in downtown Toronto. So we ended up partnering with them, and they actually pre-produced and shot the entire parade from Canada's Wonderland. So we were closed. For us, it was a way we decorated the whole park, lit it all up because we knew it was going to be on TV and broadcast to millions of people. It put the park in a fantastic light. It really showed off a lot about what the Winterfest experience would be from a visual perspective. And then on their end, it gave them a way to bring the parade to life without actually running a parade through the streets of downtown Toronto. So we were the perfect fit. You obviously need a very large venue to do it. You need a backdrop that isn't just a green screen or a sheet that you could get at, say, an airport landing strip. It gave them a really unique venue to do this. It was a gated, closed venue, so they didn't have to worry about drawing a crowd or other people coming in or having any problems that way. And I had a lot of pride sitting and watching the parade last year when it aired on TV, and just seeing Canada's Wonderland positioned that way. So then you come into this year, 2021, and no one knew if they'd be able to do the parade and return to downtown Toronto, and time kept ticking by. And so finally they had to make the decision that they couldn't run the parade. Just how significant, we talk about how big an operation an amusement park is at Wonderland. They're equally as big for a one-day event like that in terms of shutting down streets and the police presence they need and the partnerships that they need there. So we agreed again just to host them at Canada's Wonderland and allow them to film throughout the park, to pre-film the parade. And the really nice part is we actually have Winterfest open this year. So our float will be back in there. And we really hope we get a nice bump in excitement from being a part of it, and people come to Winterfest after they see how beautiful the park is. So yeah, I mean, when we talk about partnerships, that's how I view them. We've worked with companies like Lego and Hasbro to just enhance the experience at an event like Kids Fest that we run throughout the summer, and they've done some really cool augmented reality or interactive stations that kids love. So yeah, anytime we have the opportunity for a partnership that mutually benefits both sides, it's great.
Cool. If anybody has any questions, we have Dave McNeil, our CEO, said, love your social media. It's great to follow. And Gilbert from Fan Expo Informa said imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Way to go, Dwayne. So, and when I put that up, I had a vision of all his Fan Expo people going through, in costumes going through Canada's Wonderland. So
we had talked to Fan Expo back in 2019, I want to say, and I was with Toys R Us before Canada's Wonderland, so we were always a part of Fan Expo as well. Fan Expo was on our list of potential partners, and there were some preliminary discussions way back in 2019. It might take us a year or two to get back to figuring out what the partnership actually looks like. Remember, I said that it needs to be something that's mutually beneficial for everybody, and for us. We don't always view just giving away discounted tickets in exchange for a brand mention. I'm not saying that's what the program would be, but it needs to be something when we do these partnerships that really brings to life the park experience for that audience and gets that group excited about it. And in turn, it needs to be something, whatever we offer needs to add value for the other partner as well. So it needs to be something that, isn't just transactional. That's part of why I got out of the retail industry to begin with. Is it felt very transactional, like selling a pen is selling a pen. There's not a lot of emotional connection to it. If we can build something really cool that both audiences enjoy, that's kind of what we look for in our partnerships. And I appreciate the comment on the social media. I would say we've got probably, I'm going to use the word team loosely because it's really 1.5 people that deliver all of our social media content. They're the ones that are out in the park with cameras and GoPros and video cameras, capturing as much content of our events and the park experience as possible. And they boil it all down into what you see on Instagram and what you see on TikTok and Facebook, the videos, the images. The amount of content that they are able to produce is unreal. They blow me away. They're a phenomenal team and a big driver of a lot of our success, because we haven't been buying TV. We haven't been buying radio. We think about all of 2020, 2021. We weren't investing in all of your big traditional media channels. All the engagement and everything we got coming into this year was all excitement built largely out of our social media channels. They're fantastic.
How has traditional media channels, what role are they playing in your world right now?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely
still the same, or has it changed? It must have changed.
Well, it's changed over 2020, we didn't buy any traditional media because the park was closed. So that goes away. So all of I don't want to call it advertising, but any communication we were doing and marketing we were doing was all through our owned channels, through our website, our mobile app, our social media channels, our CRM data solutions, so email, direct mail, stuff that we owned, so that there wasn't a significant price tag to it. As we've come into this year, we definitely had to evaluate the media mix overall and how it was shifting. I think people's behavior is changing as a result of what happened over the past year and a half as well. People spent more time at home. They're not commuting the same way. Everyone got into Tiger King at the beginning of the pandemic and Netflix took off. So you definitely view your media mix differently because behavior has changed. And that's one of the things we partner very closely with our ad agency on, is trying to understand for our audience, just where are they consuming content nowadays, and on your phone, the difference between on your phone and YouTube and streaming services, streaming audio services, and how does that stack up to traditional linear TV or terrestrial radio and out of home boards. And it's definitely a more diverse mix. And so as we take a look at, we're in the planning process of 2022 right now, but it feels like there are just so many more channels that we have to play in and be a part of. And so, but it's not like you just get incremental dollars all the time to go and do all of these channels. So that's where we work really closely with our ad agency and media planning and buying team to figure out what that right mix is going into 2022.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. Kyle says, it sounds like people have been really excited to return to Wonderland this year. From a marketing strategy, how has Wonderland worked to invite back guests who may feel hesitant about returning back to a theme park setting through the pandemic?
Great question. That was when we laid out our 2021 marketing strategy. One of the first slides that's in that presentation every year is just what our keys to success are, or our pathways to success for a given year. In a normal year, it's sell season passes, launch brand new rides, do your events really well. this year, the very first point on there was build confidence in revisiting a place like Canada's Wonderland that is traditionally known for long lines and big crowds and screaming kids and excitement and running all over the place. So we were very upfront with how we were welcoming guests back, and what the COVID safety protocols were. And we talked about the ones that were required or mandated by the province, and then also those areas where we were going above and beyond because we knew that it was the right thing to do for our guests and to help make sure everyone felt safe. And if you were to go back through our communications cadence, especially in the early part of the year, if you think about June as we were preparing to open, July when we did reopen, we spent a lot of time, I'm sure there are videos on our social channels of how we were demonstrating what the park experience would be like for guests as they came. How queue lines would be managed to maintain social distancing, demonstrating the reservation system and how we were reinforcing our capacity limits, the masking requirements, how transactions were taking place in retail stores, our food and beverage offerings, and how we had changed. We weren't using any of our indoor dining venues anymore. Everything was outdoor, as an example. So we spent a lot of time in that first month and a half really reinforcing what all of those health and safety protocols were and adapting as we went along too. You can imagine that it's not like we said, okay, this is the perfect model for July 5th when we open, and that's what we're going to run with for the entire year. It was constant learning and adapting to make sure that we were building that confidence in the market as much as possible. So less so now, I would say people are more comfortable. We do continue to reinforce that we're an outdoor environment. Winterfest is entirely an outdoor experience where I think people are more comfortable spending their time. And we are reminding everyone about social distancing and mask wearing when that's not possible, and masks in certain areas, like when you're in the washrooms or any of our indoor restaurants. Yeah, I'd say that's the piece. Is it's one thing to tell people before they get to the park on a web page just what you're doing. It's another thing to actually bring it to life through video, through images, and show what the daily guest experience is actually like. We also we do benefit from a great relationship with influencers and bloggers, and use them as a strategic communications tool in our mix as well. And I would say this year they were great in terms of helping us tell that story as well from the perspective of someone that you would trust. So as opposed to just Wonderland with a staged video showing you what it's going to look like in a perfect world, assuming everyone was doing what they were supposed to do, that channel in particular really did help bring that story to life in a more credible way.
And how do you engage the influencers? How do you get them to focus on your property versus somebody else's?
It's a blend. A lot of, you can imagine, there's no shortage of people calling Wonderland looking to partner with us, whether it be media partners or influencers or local bloggers. So we have a consideration filter that we would put them through in terms of who their audience is, how big their following is, how frequently they post, like all that type of stuff. We'll also actually go out and approach key influencers. Key food bloggers would be an example of one where we do a lot of really neat stuff. I tried our bubble waffles for Winterfest the other night at the park, and we also do these deep fried turkey balls, which is like an entire turkey dinner in a ball on a stick. That is amazing. So you can imagine that we're trying to bring that to life as well. So we'll approach some, and then we also have a pretty good influx of those who come to us, and then we formalize the relationship so that there's expectations on both sides of what we need from it and what they need from it, and we go from there.
Wonderful. Does anybody I have no more questions. I'm sure if we kept talking, just stream of consciousness, Dwayne, I'd be fine. But does anybody have any questions? And unmute yourself, raise your hand in the reactions. Is there anything else you'd like to share that maybe we haven't covered yet?
Probably the other piece, I would say, one of my biggest takeaways and learnings from the last year and a half is I talked about how we didn't work all that closely with the Ministry of Tourism up front and early on previously in my career. Mm-hmm. Definitely how we've benefited from partnering, and anyone who's not doing it right now, looking for it. I'll take a step back. When I joined Canada's Wonderland and I kind of had tourism under my umbrella of responsibilities, I started to look into it. And I would say that tourism is one of the more complex organizational structures in terms of the number of agencies you need to partner with and work with. And as an industry, it's like it took me a whole 2 years just to figure out how many organizations were out there that we should be talking to and who we should be talking to and which ones actually add value. I would say over the last year and a half, the benefit that we've received from working really closely with, again, central counties, TIO has been amazing for the industry throughout this process. Beth was always a great resource, and Chris is continuing that. But I would say the amount that I've learned from TIO over the last year and a half has been unbelievable, and the support that we get as an industry, and we know that we have a strong voice at the table with them. Attractions Ontario is another one. We've now got Tourism Vaughan as a DMO helping us out up in Vaughan. So I would say anyone who's not connected with all of the tourism bodies and agencies and industry agencies, definitely lean on them, because you'll learn more in a very short period of time than you'll learn on your own in about 10 years. So I appreciate the partnerships we've got with all of them.
It's the same with Festivals and Events Ontario. It's hard for not-for-profits and even for not-for-profits to understand the value that your association and partnerships bring.
Yep.
And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is so much value, and it's getting to know the Maxines of this world and the Attractions Ontario people. They really are full of information. I say, for us too, like getting involved with our association, you're going to learn a lot, and we're going to connect you with people that are going to give you the information that you need and the knowledge that is going to carry you forward. So thanks for saying that. That's great. Thank you. Is there anything else that anybody else have any questions, comments? Feel free to put them into the chat. No? Well, I want to thank you. Well, go ahead. Hi, Gilbert.
Oh, sorry. I did wanted to say thank you, Dwayne. It's Gilbert with Fan Expo. But I wanted to ask you about your partnership with the Santa Claus Parade, and can you maybe share a little bit about what you're doing there? Because I think that's fantastic that you're, providing that background for them to be able to, film live and bring it into the homes of so many Ontarians and Canadians, really.
Yeah, so the Santa Claus Parade, at its essence, as I mentioned, they're a nonprofit charitable organization. So having a float in the parade, as an example, there's a hefty price tag associated with it, and they deliver a huge number of impressions to a great audience. So, but they don't view this as a business transaction and a marketing tool as much as it's a partnership that you truly have with them. I remember back in 2019. Getting to be a part of designing the float for Winterfest that would actually go through. I remember the previous executive director for the parade, who looked after all of their creative, a guy named Alf. If you've ever met him, if you ever look up Alf from the Santa Claus Parade and read some of the stories, I got to meet him when we were just going through the initial talks and the concepts of what this partnership could look like. And he just immediately pulled out a sketch pad and started to draw what his vision of our float would look like, just from things that I was telling him about Winterfest. And it was fantastic. So I would say that first year, when we were a full part of the parade and the broadcast and the partnership, that's where we really did realize that this is, as I said earlier, partnerships they need to work in a way that both sides benefit, and both are elevated. And I really genuinely felt that from the parade. So when it came to last year, it was interesting. Clay, the CEO over there, called me and said, "What do you think about us possibly? We're looking at different venues, but what would you think about filming at Canada's Wonderland?" And so initially I was like, this would be, from the marketing guy in me was like, yes, this is going to be awesome. And then I flipped to, okay, now I need to go and talk to our general manager and construction and operations team to say, okay, well, the park's closed, so we haven't put any lights up. We haven't done any decorating. We haven't done that stuff. Could we do it to, like, I don't know how long it takes or how many hours or how much it costs to build it all out and to do this properly. Because you don't want to just film it with the generic backdrop with nothing set up. If we're going to do this and we're going to be a part of it, you have to do it the right way. I would say that it was not the most difficult sell job that I've ever had in my life from the time that we brought it up. So as soon as I was able to call Clay and say, yep, Wonderland's totally in, and Bell Media, they were fantastic partners in terms of, I mean, they do all the production work, so the lighting, the sound systems, all that. But working with them closely to get to the end result, the partnership was great. The frustrating part was all the COVID protocols that were in place last winter that, okay, we can only have so many people in each zone, and we're going to drop food into this zone, and then a runner is going to have to go and pick it up to bring it over here. And you can't just have a coffee machine out that people pick from. You have to have it staffed and served. And the working through that was the most complex part of the partnership last year. But you know what? The end result was something that everyone was so ecstatic about. I remember Clay, he watched the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, which broadcast 2 weeks before ours, and they were in a similar situation where they couldn't do a live parade the way they normally would. They had to do it. I think they did it in an airplane hangar. And he called me just ecstatic. He's like, "We're going to win this year. We're going to have the better parade and actually be bigger and better than the Macy's Thanksgiving parade. This is great." So then you fast forward to this year. This year was just an added bonus. We were kind of selfishly, with Winterfest opening back up, hoping that we'd have the opportunity to do it. And we just had to work out the timing. Luckily, we opened Winterfest actually the week before the filming took place. So the park was already decorated and set and ready to go. So we were able to do it. So still a lot of work. They'll be back downtown next year. I don't know if we'll miss them doing it a third year in a row with the extra work that goes into it. But no, I think that's an example where, yeah, both of us, I mean, the exposure for Wonderland and Winterfest that we're going to get from it this year, and for them being able to put on a production. You know what? They're the Toronto Santa Claus Parade, right? Everyone knows what they are and how big they are and the quality of it and just how special an event it is. They need to put on something that, if they can't do it in a traditional way, they need to match the experience somehow. And hopefully we've done that.
Well, I think that's brilliant. Brilliant.
Great. And Kyle, why don't you just ask your question instead of me reading it?
Yeah, sorry, that one's a bit long. But yeah, I know that we're getting close to the time, but having opened the park through COVID, I imagine Wonderland has written and rewritten the book on best practices for operating through COVID with rides and concessions and games. So for a festival that's maybe looking to open for the first time since COVID, I'm wondering if you have recommendations for them on where they can turn for best practices, what resources they might turn to.
Yep. Probably my best example. So one of my hobbies that I picked up while the park was closed was I actually volunteered with the Ontario Tourism Innovation Lab to be a mentor with their Spark program. And so there were a couple of organizations that I had the chance to work with. One of them was Fields of Gold, which is a sunflower farm about 2 hours east of Toronto. A young couple that were just opening up this sunflower experience for the very first time and trying to figure out what they needed to do. And we actually spent a bunch of time on COVID health and safety protocols. Obviously they can develop big reservation systems and manage capacities and online tickets and all this other stuff. So my advice and what we did with them is that's where groups like Central Counties can really come in and help guide you to the right resources. Groups like TIO and FEO, I'm sure. All of us, the industry, the attractions industry, the tourism industry is, again, it's very different than restaurants and retail. Restaurants and retail all operate in very similar ways. We all have such unique businesses in terms of what we offer and what that guest experience actually is. There isn't going to be one playbook. There isn't going to be one set of guidelines that is cookie cutter and can apply to both an amusement park and a sunflower field. But that's sort of how the province has approached it. So working with any of your local community organizations to try and that can try and connect you. I mean, Wonderland, again, is big. So we have the benefit of we can pick up the phone and call York Region Health and get answers. When we were hosting the Santa Claus Parade, it was, okay, here's what we're thinking from a health and safety protocol perspective. What do you think? And we had that channel through. Fields of Gold didn't have that. So that's where I would be working through some of our local association partnerships. And that's some of the value that they bring through, is really helping us understand where to get that information from. or connecting with us with the right people to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, and Dave mentioned too that on our website we have lots of information under our COVID protocols or our COVID libraries. So there's lots there. And if you anybody wants to reach out to Dwayne or to me, just reach out to me and I will connect you with Dwayne. And if we can help you in any way, our offices are more than glad to help you out. So thank you, Dwayne. Thank you so much. This was so interesting and I had fun, and your stories are really engaging. And like you, I'm proud to be in this industry as well. It is very unique. It's very different, and it isn't like anything that I've ever done before. I was in the technology world before. So yeah, not very much in the world of technology. I just want to remind everybody that next week we have Amanda Murray coming. Amanda's with Clearview Township, but she's also our chair for the awards program here at Festivals and Events Ontario, and that's coming up. So we're going to talk everything awards next week. And then on December 14th, it's all things fun. It's beginning to look a lot like the holidays. So we engage you to wear your ugly sweater, bring your antlers. There's going to be some entertainment. There may be Santa Claus, and there's prizes. So I hope you'll join us, register, and thank you so much, Dwayne. I really appreciate your time and your stories. Jay, thank you for the back end, and sorry about the bad audio early on. But we fixed it. We're good. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week, Dwayne. Looking forward to building our relationship. So
Definitely. Thanks, Debbie.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Thanks.